Yo, a new bombshell clip has just dropped, specifically coming from CNBC, that exposes global Bitcoin nation state FOMO, something that we've been talking about for a couple weeks. I mean, incredible. Also, there was a prediction in this clip as well, $3 million Bitcoin by 2050, which is a little bit bearish in my opinion. But anyways, let's check out this clip and then we'll talk about it.
Some people call that fairy
dust. It's a non-U.S. asset. It's an emerging markets asset. And while we were all hyperventilating about the election over the last week, BRICS had a conference in Russia. There's 6 new members of BRICS this year. So BRICS GDP is now greater than the combined GDP of G7. Of the 6 new members, 3 of them, Argentina, the UAE, and Ethiopia, are now mining Bitcoin with government resources. So there is tremendous urgency outside of the U.S. to find a way to circumvent the irresponsible fiscal policy that we've been running here in the U.S. In fact, Russia announced an initiative. Their sovereign wealth fund is going to invest in a regional initiative to build Bitcoin mining and AI infrastructure throughout BRICS with an idea of settling global trade in Bitcoin. So look, someday, I don't know if it's 5 years, 10 years, Putin's going to die. We're going to look to reintegrate some of these countries into the world financial system, and they're going to be trading with Bitcoin. What are we going to be doing?
Okay.
Bro, I mean, starting the week off strong. Opti, this is something that you and I have been speculating about, for the last 6-7 months or so. We've got tremendous amount of indication. The most bullish one, in my opinion, was the Kingdom of Bhutan finding out that they had 1/3 of their entire GDP in Bitcoin, of which they mined. That none of that Bitcoin did they acquire in a coercive manner. And now you have, these giant countries in BRICS basically signaling that, hey, you know what? We're going to mine Bitcoin. We're going to adopt Bitcoin. Then you have someone someone on Legacy Media basically saying, hey, what's the U.S. doing here? Are they going to get caught off guard? I mean, this is what Kaiser was talking about when he coined the term global hash war. I mean, I think it's happening in full time, right in front of our eyes. And what's really interesting to me too, as well, is you have the Kingdom of Bhutan, you have El Salvador, you have Paraguay, but also the news about Russia this year, specifically how Putin was unbanning Bitcoin in the country and basically legalizing Bitcoin mining, at least on a bigger scale within the country. I mean, this is Bitcoin's incentives. I don't think any of these countries are just willingly saying, hey, you know what? We like freedom, therefore we're going to adopt something like Bitcoin. I think that's Bitcoin's irresistible incentives doing their thing. Anyways, Opti, you were covering this I believe Thursday or Wednesday of last week. You started to cover this story in regard to the BRIC summit. I mean, more news coming out. Does this surprise you at all?
No, not at all. I mean, well, actually a little bit. We did kind of mention that some BRICS nations are mining Bitcoin, but I think it is very interesting that these are government-funded mining operations, which is something that Kaiser's been saying for a long time, that the global hash war is happening right now, and whoever doesn't adopt Bitcoin is going to be late to the party and, of course, start to wreck their citizens. And so considering all the things that we've seen come out of the U.S. in regards to Bitcoin, choke point 2.0, which we've been covering all year, it's not looking good for America on that front. I know as in America, we have this need to protect the dollar, protect our world reserve currency status, and hence why we kind of are incentivized to panic a little bit and ensure that Bitcoin doesn't become the global reserve currency. But as you're seeing now, we say it all the time, if you fight Bitcoin, you're not only going to hurt yourself, but you're going to start losing the race. And if you want to maintain your position in the world, or even for smaller countries, you want to hopscotch frog leap your place in the world, then you have to adopt Bitcoin. And yeah, we covered the initial kind of opening of the BRICS statement, which was Putin basically talking about the dollar being weaponized. And now we're getting more signal that all of the BRICS nations now, maybe it's not a public announcement, but that privately they're all starting to look at Bitcoin as a legitimate vehicle to store your value, a legitimate vehicle for international trade settlement. And I mean, even the BRICS nations, like, there was rumors when we covered this news that they were going to do their own like currency, basically create like a new euro for the BRICS. And now they're doing some like, a batch of currency, that they're going to use. So you can still tell that the dinosaurs out there aren't fully embracing digital currencies or, Bitcoin and the like. But the fact that we are getting to the point now, and Jack Mallers said this at Bitcoin Amsterdam, that once we get a country that turns on the money printer to start to buy Bitcoin, like it's really game over for every other country behind them. And now that we're seeing, the BRICS nations, their governments are actively trying to pivot themselves into the mining space. Bitcoin mining is it's becoming, not only is it the only free market left in the world, but it's becoming a super competitive industry. And now that nation states are getting into it, man, I don't know. I'm getting a little worried for all the small solo miners out there, because we don't have the resources to compete with a money printer behind, Bitcoin mining infrastructure. But it's something we have been saying on the show for a long time, that once nation states and or the energy producers start to realize the incentives of Bitcoin mining, they're going to start to morph and they're going to become one. And if you don't have a nation state Bitcoin mining operation, that you're just leaving money on the table. So it is very interesting that the BRICS nations are taking Bitcoin mining and Bitcoin seriously, yet we don't have an official, announcement that they're like fully adopting Bitcoin. But it's definitely becoming that global hash war playing out in real time. And what a crazy start to the week, where it's like, this is official. 3 of the new 6 BRICS nations are actively, with government backing, mining Bitcoin. This is a huge development as far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure we're going to see some more big names pop out by either the end of this year or the beginning of next year of who's fully diving into Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, there's a big year for Bitcoin and the Bitcoin regulatory environment, right? You have the U.S. election coming up in less than a week or so. And of course, depending on who gets into office, you're either going to have a pro-Bitcoin candidate in the White House or a less pro-Bitcoin candidate in the White House. She did walk back a lot of her policy in the last couple of weeks or so as we come closer to election day. Also, in that same Legacy Media interview as well, a price prediction was dropped: $3 million Bitcoin by 2050, which sounds a little bit bearish in my opinion. But anyways, let's check it out. Here we go.
That assumes that by 2050, this is very long term, that Bitcoin becomes a reserve asset that's used in global trade and held by global central banks at a very modest 2% weight. And in that model, we arrive at a $3 million price target for Bitcoin. Now, that sounds, extreme, but that's a 16% compound annual growth rate for a couple decades. That's not really that extreme. So into the millions over the medium term is a high conviction call.
So, I mean, yeah, I would say it's a little bit bearish. I mean, if you do compare that to Michael Saylor's prediction, by the way, it's definitely on the lower end of things, right? So Michael Saylor's base case prediction for 2050, I believe, for 2045 is about $13 million per coin. So, I mean, I don't know. Opti, what do you think?
3 million by 2050 sounds bearish to me.
I mean, compare it to Sailors. Sailors was definitely.
What's 2050? 2050 is what, like 25 years from now? Like, you don't think Bitcoin's going to be higher than 3 million in 25 years? Like, come on, man. It does sound good on paper, like $3 million Bitcoin prediction, but in 25 years, like. I even think that, I'm not a big power law guy here, but I think even based off that metric here, if it does hold, like, I think it's 3 million in 5 to 10 years. So I don't know, 25 years, 3 million sounds super bearish to me. But hey, a $3 million Bitcoin, I guess it's not that bad, but I don't know. That sounds bearish to me as far as I'm concerned. 100%.
Yeah, it's but let's see. We'll we'll stay on top of it. And let's see if Simply, I mean, bro, 2050 is a long time from now, but it is a little bit bearish. I mean, I like Sailor's prediction more, 13 million by 2045. I think that sounds better, but someone in the chat, let's get to 100K first, boys. Yeah, I completely agree.
Hey, yo, Gringo, wait, before you go. I literally told that to Nico this morning. I'm like, bro, like $3 million Bitcoin prediction. Like, can we break 70K first and then we'll talk about $3 million Bitcoin?
Of course, someone in the chat would say that. Anyways, I do want to give a shout out to our lead sponsor. Of course, I'm talking about the best place to build your automatic self-custody Bitcoin stack. Of course, I'm talking about bitcoinwell.com. Bitcoinwell.com is, like I said, automatic self-custody. What does that mean? That means when you buy Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet address. Doesn't even allow you to leave your Bitcoin on the exchange. Has a clear 1% spread. It's obviously Bitcoin only, and it's completely non-custodial, empowering sovereign ownership with free automatic self-custody. To get started, head over to bitcoinwell.com today. Also, check out Bitcoin Well Infinite. I remember this is one of the things that you guys have been asking about, specifically for larger transactions. They just launched Bitcoin Well Infinite in the United States. So if you're looking for a white glove Bitcoin experience tailored to transactions of $50,000 or more, head over to bitcoinwell.com/OTC to get started. You could also send me an email at nico@bitcoinwell.com if you're interested. So I'm going to be dropping more information about Bitcoin Well Infinite over the next couple of days. But again, this is one of the things that you guys have been asking for, specifically for larger transactions. So if you're interested in that, again, head over to bitcoinwell.com/OTC to get started, or send me an email, nico@bitcoinwell.com. Also, if you're buying Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well, you earn Bitcoin Well points, and you can redeem those points towards the Bitcoin Wishing Well contest. So we're going to do that. We're going to do it for you live right now. We're going to toss a coin into the Wishing Well, get your Lightning wallets ready. First person to scan the QR code has won 500 Satoshis. If you use promo code simplybtc, again, simplybtc, to sign up to bitcoinwell.com today, you get 3 tosses into the Bitcoin Wishing Well, absolutely free. All right, everybody, let's head to the numbers. Lots to talk about today. Let's check it out. Here we go. Everybody, I want to tell you guys about our sponsor, Stampseed. Usually when you buy a hardware wallet, it comes with a piece of paper or, it comes with a piece of paper. Don't write down your seed words on a piece of paper. Paper is prone to water damage, fire damage. Your dog could potentially eat it. You want to store your generational wealth properly, which is exactly why we recommend the Stampseed Titanium Seed Phrase Storage Kit. Comes with everything you need so that you can literally stamp your seed into a plate of titanium. It comes with the metal. It comes with the titanium plate. It comes with the hammer. It comes with the letter stamping tools, and you literally stamp each letter, proof of work, letter by letter, into a plate of titanium, which is going to survive the test of time. They've put it in a pit of fire. They've put it in salt water. Your dog's probably not going to eat a plate of titanium. This is the correct way to store your generational wealth. Head over to stampseed.com today and use promo code SIMPLY. Again, promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off. At the time of recording, the Bitcoin price is $68,550. Sats per dollar, 1,459. Block height, 867,789. Realized monetary inflation, 1.26%. Market capitalization, 1.36 trillion. Bitcoin versus gold market cap, 7.08%. Money supply, 19,774,124 BTC. Percentage issued, 94.16%. In the grand scheme of things, Bitcoin is just getting started. Anyways, a topic that we've been covering for the last couple days or so is this idea of the last couple months. It's actually a recurring theme on Simply Bitcoin, which is this idea of what I call the great disintermediation. So what is first happening is the great disintermediation of information. I think we're heading to the end of that, in my opinion. And I think what's to come is the great disintermediation of money. So what do I mean by this? You have the internet has enabled mass scale peer-to-peer communication and mass scale peer-to-peer money, which is obviously Bitcoin. And that completely changes the conversation, because in the old world, specifically as it relates to information, we've seen this over the last 6 months or so. There was a handful of legacy media outlets there was a handful of legacy media outlets, and they were able to essentially control the narrative. But what we saw specifically this weekend, we literally saw one of the most popular, videos, one of the most popular interviews to hit the internet. Joe Rogan interview presidential candidate Donald Trump, and it was a long form interview. It was 3 hours long, has currently 34 million views, which is absolutely gnarly. Thing went absolutely viral. And if you listen to that conversation, I mean, Joe Rogan says this himself. The format is so radically different than what we're used to getting from the legacy media, which I would say is a terrible format. It's like 20 minutes. They fill it with like gotchas, right? And like the whole purpose of it is to like paint a frame of the person they're interviewing. It's not like a conversation. It's not like a long form podcast that you see with like Joe Rogan and stuff. And you're starting to see, we're finally starting to cross the chasm where this type of content is actually getting more attention and getting more views than the legacy media. And I think that has very big implications. What are the very big implications? Well, now all of a sudden, the people that are going to have the most influence in society are going to be independent media rather than legacy media. I mean, if you were to ask me, and I might be a little bit biased here, I would say that's a good thing. I think legacy media has abused that trust, especially if you've been watching them over the last 5 years. There's a lot of things that they got wrong. And if you reported otherwise, they would call you names. They would say it's disinformation, et cetera, et cetera. But here's Brian Armstrong. Brian Armstrong is the CEO of Coinbase. And he says, by the way, as usual, Balaji's was early but right on this. He was the first one I saw caught out this trend probably 7-8 years ago at this point. And Brian Armstrong said, this seems like the first election where new media has fully flipped traditional media. Long form podcasts, X/social, prediction marks, etc. deciding this election. Also holding traditional media accountable. Happened gradually, then suddenly. 100%. And I mean, this is like, again, one of the main things that we've been covering on Simply, right? This idea of what I call the great disintermediation, right? And it's really exciting. Here's more takes on it. Here's David Sachs. David Sachs says, I agree that legacy media has lost most of its relevance, credibility, and audience. That said, it still seems to set the terms of the discourse. Most of the debate on X consists of legacy media asserts A, alternative media debunks A, legacy media doesn't acknowledge debunk, moves on to asserting B, alternative media debunks B, and so on. Well, known legacy media is over when it's ignored completely. Getting to that point should be the goal over the next 4 years. You know, you guys always make fun of me when I bring up the term the Overton window. That's been being brought up in recent discourse. Elon Musk tweeted on October 28th. He said, ever wonder about the Overton window? And here is the guy that apparently invented it. His name is John Overton. But essentially the Overton window, for anyone who hasn't been listening to Simply Bitcoin and me repeating this term over and over again, the Overton window is essentially the acceptable window of discourse. And our job as Bitcoiners is to continue moving that window towards the idea of what is money? Why should the state have a monopoly on money? And should the government have the ability to create money for free that everyone else has to work for? And as we move the Overton window closer and closer to that, closer and closer to those ideas, people will naturally start to question their local fiat currency and start to seek the better alternative, which is obviously Bitcoin. All we have to do is continue to shift that, where people questioning what is money, it doesn't seem very radical. It starts to seem acceptable as people start to question the very idea of inflation, right? Like, why should my money have to lose purchasing power in order to function? Here's Election Wizard. He says, Axios, behind the curtain, the big media era is over. The mainstream media's dominance in narrative and reality shaping in presidential elections shattered in 2024. Axios. Very, very good point. And I'll leave it at this. There was a crazy, there was a political rally that happened yesterday. There was Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, RFK Jr., I believe Donald Trump, And you had the chairman of Counter Fitzgerald introducing Elon Musk and dropping this idea that actually Joe Rogan asked Donald Trump about on his podcast, this idea of getting rid of the federal income tax. Now, what's really interesting about this too is when Elon took the stage, he said, look, inflation is a tax. I mean, where have you heard? It's like, how long have we been saying that, Opti? And again, this is the concept of the Overton window. You guys have been listening to this idea for a very long time, but no coiners have not been listening to this. People that have not been tuning into Simply Bitcoin have not been listening to this. But again, it's not a crazy concept. It's just, it's a little bit outside of the Overton window. But when Elon Musk drops the concept of inflation is theft, right? Which he's saying that he quotes it as inflation is taxation. That is moving the Overton window. That is getting people to ask what inflation is. That is getting people to ask, wait a second. So all when they print money, it's not free. So when the government or politician offers me free things, it's not free. No, it's a form of taxation. And they dropped, I would say, the equivalent of a nuclear bomb equivalent in the media landscape, where they're dropping this idea of getting rid of the federal income tax altogether, which again doesn't sound too radical if you're a Bitcoiner and you understand the history of all of it and you've gone down the rabbit hole. But if you're a normie, right, you hear that, you're like, the country's gonna go broke. But again, because the concept is so outside of the Overton window, that is the natural response to it. But if you look into the details of when the federal income tax was introduced, which was 1913, which coincidentally was the same year that the Federal Reserve was established, 1913. And then what was the outcome of the federal income tax being established? And again, how much money does the federal government spend on a yearly basis versus how much they collect in tax revenue? And then you come to the conclusion, wait a second, they spend more money than they collect in tax revenue, so they're taxing my income and then they're taxing my money through inflation. Like, maybe the government doesn't have a tax revenue problem. Maybe the government has a spending problem. And again, it's really important that mainstream figures, we've been talking about this for a long time now, are bringing these ideas up to the mainstream consciousness. Because now all of a sudden you move that Overton window. In fact, you don't move it. You shatter it, right? And then people start to ask questions. And I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, this rabbit hole, once you start going down it, ends with one thing and one thing only: ending the Federal Reserve. That's how it ends. So once you start going down this path, you inevitably reach to what the root problem, the root cause of all this evil is, which is the central bank, the Federal Reserve, right? So I'm really glad that it's moving in this direction, and I hope it ends where we want it to end, which is ending the Fed. And a lot of the questions is like, okay, so let's say you end the Fed, what do you replace it with? I remember Thomas Sowell getting asked this question, and the way he answered it was like super, super clever. And he's basically like, so when you cut out a cancer, what do you replace it? Like, it's a stupid question. Like, you don't replace it with anything. Anyways, here again is Howard Shrupnik, the chairman, CEO. Lupnick.
Shrupnik.
Forgive me. Here's Howard Lupnick, the CEO and chairman of Counter Fitzgerald. Let's see what he has to say.
We all say, make America great again. But let's just go over for a minute what that means, because we all say it as a slogan. When was America great? At the turn of the century, our economy was rocking. This is 1900, 125 years ago. We had no income tax. And all we had was tariffs. All we had was tariffs. And we had so much money that we had the greatest businessmen of America get together to try to figure out how to spend it. That's who we were then. But then we had World War I and we had World War II. And we felt we had a duty to rebuild the rest of the world. So here's what we did. We took down our protection. We took down our tariffs. And we turned instead and we taxed Americans so that we could export the power of our economy and save the rest of the world, which we did. Now let me ask you a question. What decade should that have ended? Should it have ended in the 80s? The 90s? 2000? What in the world are we doing? We're letting the rest of the world eat our lunch. And it is time to make America great again.
Okay, so that's again. This is why Elon is talking about the concept of the Overton window. This is why I'm talking about the concept of the Overton window. If you are not a Simply Bitcoin viewer, regular viewer, if you are not a Bitcoiner in general, and you hear the idea of ending the federal income tax, that is so outside of what you think is acceptable. You're like, wait a second, who's going to pay for everything? Isn't going to bankrupt the federal? Again, I ask you to not react initially. I ask you to do a little bit of research. Go down that rabbit hole. And I promise you, like, you're not necessarily going to be happy with what you find. But yeah, I mean, you know, this idea that you work your butt off, and let's say you're in the higher income tax bracket. If you're in some countries, you're paying 50% of that income to the government. 50% of it. Are you getting 50% of value back? That's my question for you guys, right? And again, it's not that you're paying income tax, but you're also paying currency tax, which is inflation. So add that on top of the income tax that you're paying. And again, you like that leads you to a conclusion. It's like, then, like, you know, is this fair? Is this equitable? Is this, you know, is this working out? And one of the most insidious things about the inflation tax is that it disproportionately affects the lower and middle classes the most, because the lower and middle classes are the ones who save and earn in fiat. And if you save and earn in fiat, the inflation tax is going to disproportionately affect you the most, right? So anyways, yeah. I wanted to touch on that. I think it's really interesting. I mean, Opti, I think we got this right. I mean, how long have we been talking about the Overton window? How long have we been talking about, you know, the inefficiencies of government? How long have we been talking about the inflation tax? It's almost as if, I mean, we've been talking about this for quite a long time. I didn't anticipate this fucking window moving over so quickly, so rapidly. I still thought we had years of dialogue before getting to this point. But it seems like this year's election environment really moved things forward a lot quicker in regards to Bitcoin, in regards to tax policy, in regards to money. And again, once these ideas are thrown out into the mainstream consciousness, you can't put them back in the bottle, right? They're going to continue to grow from this point. The fact that a mainstream political candidate is talking about ending the income tax is radical. It's extreme. But again, what I have to say for you guys is, why did they implement the income tax? Well, the whole idea was to pay for some wars, to get some value back. But what Howard Lupnick was basically saying is that, like, look how wealthy we were in the beginning of the century. Like, what did we get for paying all of this money, right? You can say this giant bloated bureaucracy. Like, what was the value added back? Like, maybe in the beginning you could have pitched us the idea and we could have given you the benefit of the doubt. But at this point, you're just kind of like, like maybe radical idea, crazy idea, everyone. Maybe it's time to try something a little bit different and to see how it ends up. Anyways, guys, if you guys are enjoying the show so far, make sure to smash that like button. Really, really helps with the algos and getting to push this message forward, further moving that Overton window. Anyways, Opti, what's your take on all this?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think what we just heard is something I've kind of been saying on the show for a long time. It feels like the pendulum is swinging away from, you know, the left and going more towards the right, or some might argue more towards like a base perspective. And I think people are just really tired of the left progressive ideologies that's been basically forced on us. And I think this is just like a good encapsulation of what the zeitgeist is right now. And they wouldn't be saying these things if the majority, or at least the majority of their voting base, didn't believe the same things. And so I do love that they are kind of floating these ideas. I actually do have the Trump clip for the culture, but I was going to kind of gloss it over. So maybe if we want to play it later in the show, we can hit on it. But I think there was a really, really big point that Howard Lutnick said in that speech, which is something we've obviously as Bitcoiners talk about constantly. And it's the idea that all wars are bankers' wars. And the World War II military industrial complex, the military machine, hasn't been turned off since World War II. And this is why we are in the position that we are right now, is because, like Howard was saying, that, you know, the income taxes have basically how we justify going into the war, and that's how supposedly we pay for all the wars going on in the world. But there was another point that I do want to hit on, which is what David Sachs said. And I think that's such an important message right now, though I would argue that, you know, us here and whatever you want to call them, you know, right-leaning people on the internet, I think one of the problems that us independent content creators do have right now is we are very reactionary towards the media. And like David Sachs was saying, you know, the media says one thing and we spend all our time debunking it. And, you know, what we try to do here constantly is, yes, we do, like, our job is to debunk the corporate press. But I think a lot of the stuff that we need to do, not only as Simply Bitcoin, but independent content creators, is go on the offensive a little more versus just being reactionary, because that's how the left and the corporate press is really good. They just keep, you know, shooting missiles metaphorically and just like attacking, while we have to spend all the time debunking stuff, which reminds me of, what's that meme where it's like, it takes like twice as long or whatever, 3 times as long to disprove lies and all that stuff. And that's where we are right now. And so I think my mic is messing up.
No, you're good.
So it is an interesting trend that we find ourselves in, because I do think, like, I've been saying it for a while, and it's really just been more of like a gut feeling and seeing what's going on, that it seems like the pendulum is swinging towards the other way. And we'll see what happens in this election, because, like, you know, there was another point there where I think it was David Sachs, or maybe it was Brian Armstrong, who said, like, this is going to be the first election that the independent content creators are basically outperforming the media class. And remember what we said, you know, 2016, when Trump did get elected, it was because the media, the corporate press, wasn't ready for basically a band of internet memers to continue to combat the truth. And now that this is kind of the status quo, that independent content creators are just absolutely blowing the corporate press out of the water right now, I think it is going to move towards that direction. And we all know that only really, you know, like 60 plus are the ones watching the news, and everyone else gets their news in real time from Twitter or even like TikTok. And so we are entering a new era right now, and it's just very interesting what's going on. And obviously stay vigilant and make sure that you're not trusting, but you are verifying. But it is crazy that this stuff's even getting floated out right now. And it's almost like the Ron Paul meme, like it's happening, like it feels like it is happening right now. And man, it's just crazy. It's gonna be very interesting what's happening next week.
100%, man. It's all happening right now. We're in a really good spot, man. It's just can't believe all this is happening, but I think it's all bullish for Bitcoin. All right, everybody, let's get to the news. We have lots to talk about. Let's check it out. Here we go.
Special shout out to our sponsor, Compass Mining. They make Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone, from beginners to experienced investors. Their turnkey miners gets you online and hashing within 48 hours, making it easier than ever to start your mining journey. Plus, with their active marketplace, you can resell your miner at any time, adding flexibility and value to your investment. Visit their website to access a wealth of resources, learning everything you need to know about Bitcoin mining. Take your first step into the world of Bitcoin mining with confidence. Discover more at compassmining.io. Again, compassmining.io, and see how Compass Mining can power your success. I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Foundation. It's self-custody done right. They built a premium grade hardware wallet called Passport right here in the US, and it integrates seamlessly with their free app called Envoy. Passport is fully open source and verifiable. It's the most intuitive Bitcoin wallet designed with a UX reminiscent of a classic feature phone, so you'll know how to navigate it and use it the moment you pick it up. It's also air-gapped, meaning Bitcoin stays offline, never touching an internet connection. It's Bitcoin only, open source verifiable, air-gap security model, gorgeous design craft, premium grade materials. Get your Bitcoin off exchanges and into your own hands in just a few minutes with Passport at foundation.xyz/simply. Get peace of mind for your piece of Bitcoin.
Everybody, I do want to talk about this. By the way, guys, get yourself a Passport by Foundation devices. Scan the QR code on your screen, take you directly to the Foundation Devices website, where you could use promo code SIMPLY to get a small discount. Not your keys, not your cheese. Anyways, so I did want to cover this. Check this out. Specifically, this person, Satya Nadella, he is the chairman and CEO of Microsoft. And Microsoft essentially held a meeting. Opti talked about this last week, but they held a meeting in regards to, I'll read this specifically. And this comes, I believe that they sent this to their investors and whatnot and shareholders. MicroStrategy, which like Microsoft is a technology company, but unlike Microsoft, holds Bitcoin on its balance sheet, and has had its stock outperform Microsoft stock this year by 313%, despite doing only a fraction of the business that Microsoft has, and they're not alone. The institutional and corporate adoption of Bitcoin is becoming more commonplace. Microsoft's second largest shareholder, BlackRock, offers its clients a Bitcoin ETF. So very, very interesting. And again, this is something that we've also called on Simply. We've been saying that market forces are going to do what market forces do best. And essentially, if you don't get on the Bitcoin train, you risk getting left behind. And I think this is an example of a company saying, wait a second, like we're doing well, we're doing well as a company, closing deals, right? We have a lot of profit. Why is MicroStrategy, which is supposedly a much smaller company, outperforming our stock? And then they come to the inevitable conclusion. The reason that MicroStrategy is outperforming everyone is because they have the cheat code, and the cheat code is Bitcoin, right? So I would say that it's inevitable. And Michael Saylor has been beating the battle drum over the last couple of weeks, like posting and tagging CEOs and like basically like poking them and basically saying like, look, the reason I'm outperforming everyone is because I'm on a Bitcoin strategy. And then if they get on the Bitcoin train, all of a sudden their incentives align with ours. Their stock starts to outperform everyone else. And the reason is because they're on a Bitcoin standard. And it just becomes this like self-fulfilling prophecy that just, it's again, aligned incentives. So anyways, I thought that was really fascinating. I didn't get a chance to talk about it because I was traveling. I was at the Plan B Forum in Lugano, Switzerland. Absolutely great conference. But I didn't get to talk about it. But I thought that was the news. Like that is signal. Like I wonder what the ending vote is going to be. And even if it's negative, even if they don't vote to acquiring Bitcoin, MicroStrategy is still going to outperform everyone. So if you have Tesla and MicroStrategy, they both have Bitcoin. All those other tech companies are at a competitive disadvantage to MicroStrategy and Tesla. Obviously, MicroStrategy has acquired so much Bitcoin that, like, essentially, like, that stock is just going to follow the price of Bitcoin, like ultimately. But anyways, Opti, what's your thoughts on this? You initially covered this last week when the news dropped.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it kind of just sort of repeating myself. We've been saying that by the end of this year, we're going to see some of the biggest names start to at least take the Bitcoin thesis seriously. And now we have it. Microsoft is basically, I think, it's the second largest company in the world. And the fact that they're having a shareholder meeting to vote to add Bitcoin to their balance sheet or, add it as an investment, I think is a huge point in the Bitcoin story. We'll see what actually happens with this. But the real signal here is that it's probably not just Microsoft that are thinking about this. Yes, they haven't taken it to a shareholder meeting yet, but I'm sure that the heads up high at Apple are also talking about this. We all know Tesla has Bitcoin on their balance sheet. They're the 12th largest company in the world. So every company, the biggest companies in the world, have to take Bitcoin seriously. We'll see how this plays out. Being a little more cynical, I guess you could kind of say Microsoft isn't really like a Bitcoin company. I don't think any Bitcoiner even uses Microsoft, and maybe we don't want Microsoft to add Bitcoin to their balance sheet. But hey, it just goes to show that the signal's spreading, and Bitcoin as an asset, or rather as a currency, as we like to say it, it's becoming a very serious topic, and people have to look into Bitcoin. They have to at least take it seriously. If you are laughing at Bitcoin at this point, it's just a classic have fun staying poor meme. If the biggest names in the world aren't getting you at least a little bit curious as to what this Bitcoin is, and you're not doing even a couple hour research into reading into what Bitcoin is, its value proposition, then you really are a dinosaur and you're not keeping up with the times. And I think this is just further confirmation to everything we've been saying, that now everyone has to take Bitcoin seriously. And we'll see what this vote, we'll see what happens with this vote, and whether they add it or not, I think is besides the point. But it just goes to show these conversations are happening, and you have to at least seriously judge whether you need to add Bitcoin to your balance sheet. Yes, you could argue that I'm already diversifying my portfolio well enough where I don't need Bitcoin. Sure, you can, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and say that, yeah, maybe you're correct, but I don't know. I think, Bitcoin is the fastest race in the horse. And if you really want to outperform the markets, then why would you ignore Bitcoin? It's blowing everything out of the water. I think next year it's going to blow everything out of the water. And, whatever. I guess we just ran Wall Street, and it is what it is.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, let's get to the culture. We have a lot to talk about. Let's check it out. Here we go. All right, everybody, I do want to tell you about the Orange Pull app. The Orange Pull app is the Bitcoin social layer. Stack friends who stack sats. Join the 12,233 Bitcoiners that are currently on the app. The Orange Pull app is a great resource if you're traveling, you're on the go, perhaps you're going to a conference and you don't know any Bitcoiners around you. The Orange Pull app is for you. It has a really clever geographical feature that it will show you the Bitcoiners that are near you, and it'll give you the capability to send them a message and connect with them directly. It's also one of the best ways to reach me. If you have a question for me, don't send me a message on Twitter. Don't email me. Send me a message on the Orange Pill app. And every week or two, I make sure to get back to every single one of you guys. Download the Orange Pill app today to get started. Scan the QR code or check the link in the video description. All right, obviously you have a video pulled up. What are you going to talk about today?
Yeah, wait. Hold on. Did I say fastest race in the horse again? I was getting trolled in the chat. Okay, fastest horse in the race. All right, my bad. I keep messing that one up. Yeah, I guess maybe I said that again. I saw that I said that last. Anyways. Nico, you brought this up. We can play this after if we got time, but this isn't the clip that I wanted to hit on, considering this is the culture. And I think we had two big cultural moments yesterday. Obviously, Trump went on Joe Rogan, has now 37 million views in 3 days or something, which I think is the fourth or fifth biggest episode on Joe Rogan, and all the other episodes have been out for 4 to 5 years. So again, it goes to show that these type of topics, whether you love or hate Trump, the fact that he can go on Joe Rogan and talk about eliminating the income tax and it be taken seriously, and now people are like, whoa, okay. Like, as a Bitcoiner, I never thought that that would even be something coming out of a presidential candidate's mouth. Whether there'll be follow through on that, it's a totally different story. But the fact that we're talking about this, I think, is a good precedent for moving forward of what are some actual things we can do to fix our country here, but also every country around the world. And especially when you're seeing some countries in the EU go just like completely the opposite way and, you know, force taxes and do all kinds of crazy stuff that are going to hurt their citizens. Anyways, we can play this after, but the real clip that I wanted to hit was, again, part of the Trump Vance ticket, JD Vance going on Tim Dillon's show. And as a Bitcoiner, you know, we're all basically like offsprings of Ron Paul and what he set out and what he's been saying for a long time, hashtag end the Fed. And we had JD Vance go on Tim Dillon. I don't have the numbers on how big of a reach this one got, but he does do a little nod to Ron Paul, and I do want to cover his response, Ron Paul's response to this. So I'm gonna play this, and then we'll chat about it. And if we have some time, I can play the Trump clip.
Isn't it BlackRock? Is there a way to calm that down where they're purchasing all? And they're driving up the cost of real estate. You walk around New York City, there are buildings that are full of empty apartments because it's money laundering from people overseas that are stashing money, and it's raising the cost of living for the entire city.
That's exactly right. And you know, if like, I'm actually not a Ron Paul guy. One of my dear friends is a big Ron Paul guy, but like, I've kind of come around to the Ron Paul argument. I don't fully agree with it, but the criticism of the Federal Reserve that makes the most sense to me is that it gives massive corporations a lower cost of money than the average American, right? So part of the reason BlackRock has been able to buy all these homes is you ask, well, what is BlackRock borrowing at? Right? What rate are they borrowing at? Because the average American right now, I think the average mortgage interest rate is somewhere around 7% right now. Okay, BlackRock's borrowing at like 1.5, 2.5%, right? So if they're paying a much lower cost for debt than the average American, then they have a huge advantage. They buy up all the homes, they jack up all the costs. And again, going back to the Jeffersonian idea of Americans as owners and as citizens in their own country, well, what happens when BlackRock owns your home and say they say you're not allowed to own a firearm because we own this home, you don't own this home? Okay, there goes the Second Amendment. What if they say, well, for all residents in our places, we don't want you to put up yard signs for certain political candidates? Well, there goes the First Amendment. Yeah. There's a connection, there's a very deep connection between the idea of American citizenship, the full idea, and the liberties that actually make American society such a cool place to live. And if we turn everybody into renters, we're going to destroy that. I mean, I think that, like...
Here's where you're wrong, though. People really like these shows where people buy $20 million homes, like Selling Sunset. Most isn't that as good as owning a home? Because there's 30 shows about people buying mansions, and people get to watch them. So you don't have to cut grass. You can watch somebody else buy a house. But that is what's happening, by the way.
Yeah. You can live in a pod and eat your roasted crickets, but watch other people living the American dream.
Yo, hilarious. The last part, you know, AKA the Make America Healthy Again. You can, you know, eat the grasshoppers and live in the pod and watch other people be rich. This is the weef. You will own nothing and be happy. But the Ron Paul point, which is really, I mean, I think it's kind of amazing that Trump and Vance are both themselves kind of saying a lot of things that would come out of Ron Paul's mouth. Kind of, you know, I know Trump's kind of been trying to persuade the libertarians to vote for him, but they are starting to say some of the talking points that Ron Paul has been saying for a long time. And Ron Paul on Twitter just basically doubles down on this, which is what we say all the time on the show. The Fed is the prime source of economic problems. Our nation needs sound money again. And I'd be very happy to discuss this with you, JD Vance. And so, hey, are we there yet? I don't know, but it does seem like, you know, we have Trump on one hand saying maybe we should eliminate the income taxes. We have Vance on the other hand being, yeah, actually, you know, I'm not a full Ron Paul guy, But a lot of the things he's saying, I'm starting to believe in. And what's like Ron Paul's main message? And the Federal Reserve is not federal. It has no reserves. The central banks out there, especially in America, the Fed, of course, they are the root cause of our economic problems because it all boils down to one simple explanation of inflation. Where is the root cause of inflation? It's them expanding the money supply. And so, hey, JD Vance kind of, I think, missed it a little bit when he's talking about the interest rates and stuff. It's really about the expansion of the money supply. Those who can control the money obviously can print money that we all have to work for. They can put it where they want to. And he kind of touched on that about the interest rates, but he isn't hitting the root source of this. But it does seem like, as Nico was saying earlier, the Overton window has shifted at least enough where we can at least seriously have these conversations in America about eliminating income taxes. Maybe the Federal Reserve is the main problem here. Maybe the problem is creating money out of thin air. Maybe we need to go back to a sound money era. And you can see that the Republican Party is at seemingly, at least in rhetoric, talking about protecting Bitcoin, protecting the Bitcoin industry. And so I think these are all, very good developments when you kind of look at the opposite side and they're like, yeah, we're going to tax you out of existence. We're going to, choke point 2.0 you. We're going to do whatever we can to hamper the Bitcoin industry. So I just find it very interesting that on some of the biggest mainstream podcasts, we can have these conversations and we're not just relegated to, dark corners of the internet or on Twitter where it's just Bitcoin Twitter. All right, go, Nico.
Yeah, Opti's. Well, I don't know what happened with Opti. No, bro. Listen, I want to talk about this Overton window concept. Opti, just use your FaceTime. I want to talk about the Overton window concept, right? Which is like something that we've been talking about for many, many months now, and it's happening, right? Like the Ron Paul, meme thing. It's happening, and it's. Just like the Bitcoin becoming an electoral issue, it's happening a lot quicker than I anticipated. I thought that Bitcoin was going to become an electoral issue without a shadow of a doubt by 2028, guaranteed. And I think the current administration expedited that by taking such a hostile stance towards the industry. Thank you, Elizabeth Warren. I'll say thank you once I found out the results of the election, because it could really go either way from a regulatory perspective. But yeah, that Overton window is shifting hardcore. And the third party candidates, no doubt in my mind, they would bring up these concepts. Like the Libertarian Party up there, like going up there and saying these things, like it's like, that's not surprising. But party candidates bringing this up, like, bro, this is just to kind of give you an idea, guys, like just these two things. Donald Trump at the Bitcoin conference says, so protect the right to self-custody, and he's thinking about making Bitcoin a strategic reserve asset. Fast forward 3 or 4 months later, I want to end the income tax. Like guys, like this is gnarly. This is gnarly. And if you're on the other side of this, like if you're part of the unelected bureau, let me ask you guys something. Who's running the country right now? Who's running the country right now? Do you think it's Joe Biden? Okay. I'm gonna leave that right there. I'm not gonna answer that.
Yeah, I was gonna joke too, but
I'm gonna just leave that simmering. Okay. So if he hasn't been running the country, who's been running the country? The answer is simple. The person who's been the machine has been running the country. It's always been running the country, in my opinion. And you have to identify what is the source of funding for said machine. And as the machine gets bigger, it naturally has to take away more and more of your freedoms, because it essentially it needs funding. It needs a revenue source. And what is that revenue source? The American people, right? So I think what's happening right now is really, really fascinating. We're like a really interesting point in history. We're exiting the disintermediation of information, I think that's come full circle. I think with the Joe Rogan interview with Trump, I think it represented something that started like 4 years ago or so. But now all of a sudden, the independent media is now getting more traction than the legacy media. For some reason, the legacy media is still setting the debate, but the independent media has become the media. What I anticipate is going to happen in the next 4 years or so is what just happened with the disintermediation of information is going to happen with money. And it's going to be called, in my opinion, the disintermediation of the disintermediation of money, the separation of money and state. And you're starting to see the first innings of that. When they talk about end the income tax, that's a really great indication to where this is going. If you start asking that question, the secondary natural question, the inevitable question is end the Fed. If you're going to say end income tax, you're going to end with end the Federal Reserve. That's what's going to happen. That's like the natural evolution of this. And if this is where we are, if the Overton window has moved to this point, where do you think it's going to be in 4 years? Bitcoiners have not won until we end central banking. That's why Bitcoin was born. That's why we're here. That's what's really going to end the enslavement of humanity. Central banking. Until we end the central banks, things will not change. Humanity will never be free. That's what we have to do. And we have to do it with informing the populace with the dangers of central banking. And again, I would say putting pressure on the machine. And you can't do that in any other way. You have to do it peacefully. You have to do it legally. And you have to do it with truth and information. And now that they've lost their monopoly on information, their control on the narrative, these types of ideas are going to be a lot easier to propagate. Because when you tell someone like Joe Rogan, I want to end the income tax, he's going to ask you a genuine question about it. If you say that on legacy media, they will attack you in 3 different ways. Why? Because they are part of the system. They are part of the system of control itself. So the fact that the discussion is happening outside of the system of control is very good for Bitcoin. It's very good for our movement. And the fact that this is happening, you're going to start to hear many topics that were otherwise never going to be able to be talked about being talked about. And we are entering a very, very interesting moment in human history. I don't think it's like a new renaissance. I don't think America has gone through this type of fork in the road in a very long time. And I think this upcoming election, I agree with Elon when he says this, is really going to determine which way we go for the foreseeable future. I think if one party wins and the other party doesn't win, I think that what's happening right now is inevitable. I think the cause of this is the internet. I think the internet makes the everyday person more informed on everyday issues. I think social media gives them the power of information at their fingertips. That information isn't censored. That information isn't controlled, even though they're trying to do that. And I think that informs the populace. And once the populace is informed, the inevitable outcome of that is, why does my money need to steal from me? Why does central banking need to exist? Why am I poorer than my parents? Right? And then you start to ask those questions and you're like, And they don't have answers to this. Their answers are to gaslight you, to call you racist, to call you an extremist. But they don't want to answer this. They don't want to answer. They don't want to talk about it because they don't have a good response. So they would rather bury it. But now that they can't bury it because they've lost their monopoly on information, they have to confront it. And if they have to confront it, they can only give you like actual valid reasons. You want to know why the Rogan interview took off the way it did? It's because people know that when Trump went on Rogan wasn't just going to go like, gotcha, you're a racist. Like, it was going to be a natural, free-flowing conversation. And that's what you got for 3 hours. And that's in stark contrast to what the media has been telling you for the last 9 years, that Trump essentially is like, you know, the second coming of Satan, essentially. And, you know, I'm not a fan of all of Trump's policies, but at the same time, I want to be able to do my own research and come to my own conclusion rather than the media getting to dictate how you should feel about certain things. Like, we don't live in a free society if the media is getting to dictate the narrative and how you should feel about certain topics and issues. We don't live in that society. The internet is bringing that to light, and rather than them adjusting and pivoting, they keep doubling down on this idea of we should be the ones that get to dictate what is true and what is not true. Anyways, Opti, you want to close it out?
No, I mean, I think you kind of killed it, man. It just goes to show that we are entering into a new paradigm. And for the OGs here that been in Bitcoin for 7+ years, what's the Carlos Matos? I'm blanking the BitConnect guy's name. It's like, we no longer live in the world that we once lived in, or whatever it was. This is where we are. We are entering a new paradigm, and it is very interesting. Obviously, there's going to be some trade-offs along the way, and I think things will get kind of crazier as we start to move along into this new paradigm that we find ourselves in. But hey, as Bitcoiners, we're protected, and Bitcoin is speech after all, and free speech is super important. And hopefully more people realize that, yeah, man, like conversating on the internet peer-to-peer is the most important thing to be doing. Again, I'm always reminded of the headline of doing your own research is bad, like trust the experts. Like, this is the world they want us to live in, a two-tiered system where the quote-unquote financial elites tell you what the truth is, and us peasants have to just eat it and take it as it's gold, or the holy word over here. And it's like, no, now that game is changing, and that means that there is upward mobility if you understand what is going on. If you have the asymmetric knowledge and understanding of how the world really works, which we think Bitcoin does and allows for more people, then you're entering into a better world. And what do you always say, Nico? Fiat is the world of pessimism, nihilism, and war, and Bitcoin is the world of optimism, freedom, and peace. Like, I don't know. It's such a simple. It's so simple. It's really so simple.
It's so simple. Not complicate it. People make it complicated. Anyways, guys, if you guys enjoyed today's show, make sure to smash that like button. Share this video. It seems like we got a little bit of
yeah, I think we got a little bit. I don't even know if we can say
a little bit. It's been happening at like at least once a week for the last month or so.
We have a new topic that we can't talk about here.
But yeah, share today's video, and of course, we'll be back tomorrow for a brand new episode of Simply Bitcoin Live. Peace out, everybody. Take care.
Brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.